Welcome to the Chronicles of Lost Relations. 5 years ago, I tied the knot with Andrea, thanks to my mother who thought she would be a wonderful partner for me. She possessed a gentle demeanor, spoke with a soothing voice, and radiated a warmth that enveloped me in comfort. Following our wedding, she chose to embrace the role of a housewife, while I carried on with my career as an accountant for a reputable businessman in Culiacan. Life was splendid. I ensured that Andrea had all she could desire. A stunning residence in Colonia Centro, a life of ease, and the liberty to pursue her desires. She had previously expressed a desire for children, but later she concluded that we should postpone that decision. I concurred, believing we possessed an endless expanse of time ahead of us. In the initial years, tranquility reigned. Andrea maintained the house with care, crafted delightful meals, and welcomed me with a warm smile upon my return. She was my serene escape from the pressures of my job. However, she began to devote more of her time to a circle of women from the neighborhood. Initially, it didn't seem significant to me. A woman requires companionship, I reminded myself. However, I quickly came to understand that these women were not the right companions for her. They were homemakers indeed, but not of the esteemed variety. They adorned themselves in elegant attire purchased with their spouse's diligent earnings, while their days were filled with idle chatter, sipping coffee, and lamenting their circumstances without taking any steps to enhance them. Their partners toiled tirelessly, while they enjoyed a life of comfort, indulging without limits. I perceived them for what they truly were: parasites, individuals who drained their partners completely without a moment's hesitation. I wished for Andrea to remain distinct from them. One evening, as I settled at the dining table, loosening my tie after a long day, I resolved to discuss it with her. "Andrea," I remarked, observing her as she placed a plate of fresh tortillas on the table, "I've observed that you've been dedicating quite a bit of time to those women from down the street." She cast a fleeting look in my direction, her face a mask of mystery. "Indeed, they are quite pleasant. Having friends close by is truly a blessing." I let out a derisive laugh. "Wonderful. Andrea, are you aware of the type of women they are? They spend their days idly, squandering their husbands' finances and lamenting their circumstances. There's a distinct lack of appreciation for those who support them." She scowled, folding her arms tightly. "That is not accurate. They're simply homemakers like myself. We converse, exchanging thoughts and ideas. What's the issue with that?" I let out a weary breath, massaging my temple. "What's troubling is that they will clutter your mind with absurdities. Initially, it's just light conversation. Next, it's grievances regarding their spouses. And before you realize it, they'll be suggesting that you deserve better, that you ought to ask for more from me, that your life isn't satisfactory." I leaned in, my tone resolute. "I put in a lot of effort for us, Andrea. I provide all that you require. I don't want you to pay attention to those who fail to value what they possess." She pressed her lips together, a flash of annoyance crossing her features. "I'm not a kid, Diego. I have the freedom to select my own companions." I squinted my eyes. "Please exercise caution. Avoid them at all costs. They aren't beneficial for you." She shook her head, her jaw clenched in determination. "You haven't seen them through my eyes. They aren't as terrible as you might believe." I let out a sharp breath, a wave of frustration swelling within me. "Andrea, I'm fully aware of what I'm discussing. Please hear me out." However, she chose not to. That July evening began just like any other. After a long day at work, I found myself immersed in the intricate dance of balancing accounts, navigating the familiar pressures of figures that always told the truth. As I made my way home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting vibrant shades of orange and rich purple across the sky. Feeling weary, I anticipated a peaceful dinner, perhaps even a brief chat with Andrea, provided she wasn't too caught up in the latest tales her new friends had shared that day. As I crossed the threshold, an eerie stillness enveloped the house. Excessively quiet, the kitchen remained shrouded in darkness, the table still and unblemished. That was peculiar. Andrea consistently had something prepared, even if it was merely remnants from lunch. I shouted her name into the air. Silence prevails. I glanced over at the parking area. Her vehicle remained in its place. This indicated that she had not ventured out for a drive. A chill crept into my heart. I took out my phone and called her number. It rang once, twice, then I attempted once more. The outcome remains unchanged. My grip on the phone intensified as my thoughts whirled through a myriad of possibilities. Where might she have ventured without the vehicle? What could be the reason for her silence? I lingered in anticipation. Time slipped away, transforming mere minutes into a full hour, then a pair. By 11 p.m., I found myself pacing near the front door, my frustration simmering and bubbling into anger. As I pondered the idea of reaching out to someone, despite not knowing who that might be, I suddenly heard the distinct sound of heels striking the pavement in an irregular rhythm outside. I swung the door wide, and there she stood. Andrea stood there, gently swaying, a relaxed smile playing on her lips. She wore an outfit unlike anything I had encountered, one that offered minimal coverage of her form. The material embraced her form, revealing a daring neckline and a flirtatious hemline. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and most troubling of all, she emitted a strong scent of alcohol. "Diego," she mumbled, her smile wide as if this were the most ordinary thing imaginable. Her breath held the biting aroma of tequila, intertwined with an elusive undertone. And then I caught a whiff of it. Inexpensive fragrance for men. Not my own. Where on earth have you been? I inquired, my tone calm and measured, even as my veins pulsed with intensity. Andrea chuckled softly, propping herself against the doorframe as if her legs were struggling to support her. My diminutive accountant, she cooed, extending her hand to gently caress my cheek with trembling fingers. "Guide me to the bed where I may find solace and rejuvenation." I gazed at her, each fiber of my being coiled with control. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront her, to insist on the truth. Yet, it was clear to me that she was not in a condition to engage in conversation. I chose to remain silent. I grasped her arm and led her through the door, struggling to endure the fragrance that lingered on her skin. She sank onto the bed with a satisfied sigh, drifting into slumber even before I had a chance to move away. I paused for a moment, gazing down at her, my mind swirling with a tempest of thoughts. In silence, I pivoted and exited the room. Downstairs, the house remained as quiet as it had been, yet the silence now carried a weight, a palpable heaviness. Answers were essential to me. I picked up Andrea's phone from the counter, where it had been left behind in a moment of distraction. She never bothered with a lock, never found it necessary. My fingers danced swiftly across the screen as I delved into her messages, then explored her social media profiles. And that was the moment I laid eyes on them. Correspondence from an individual named Juan. Clear and direct. Unpleasant. They had a sensual quality. Rest eluded me that night. As I lay in the guest room, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, my thoughts spiraled around those messages, those vile words from another man directed at my wife, and even more troubling, her enthusiastic replies. My fists tightened beneath the blankets as I envisioned them side by side, her in that dress, carrying his scent. I felt the urge to scream, to shatter something, yet I refused to grant her the pleasure of witnessing my unraveling. I prefer to manage this in my own manner. The dawn broke, and I pushed myself through my familiar rituals. I stepped into the shower, lathered up, shaved with precision, and put on my work attire as though it were just another ordinary day. I required a sense of calmness. I refused to allow her to believe she held any sway over me. While I was in the kitchen preparing my breakfast, I noticed her footsteps getting closer. She entered, radiating a sense of freshness, completely unblemished by the grime of the night before. Her hair remained tousled, yet she had freshened her face, removing the makeup and the lingering scent of alcohol. She glided in with an air of nonchalance, settling at the kitchen table and stretching languidly like a contented feline. "Hey, darling, could you make me a coffee?" she said, her voice silky and tinged with a hint of playfulness. I pivoted gently, placing my mug down with care. Our gazes locked, hers icy and resolute. Why not give one a call and see if he can whip up a coffee for you? I spoke, my tone steady and measured. For a moment, she stood still. Hold on a moment. Then she smiled, a gradual, understanding smile. Well, you see, she whispered. She inclined her head just a bit. Have you had a chance to look at my phone? I suppose so. I chose not to reply. I had no need to. She let out a sigh, as though this was failing to capture her interest. Listen, if I bring him over, you won't be around. She leaned in, propping her chin on her hand. If you keep treating me well as you have, I will gladly continue to reciprocate that kindness. Otherwise, my dear, I shall turn your existence into a nightmare. I chuckled quietly, a smile playing on my lips as I shook my head. This woman, the one I married, believed she could intimidate me, believed she could coerce me into accepting her disgrace. I faced her, my smile mirroring hers, yet my eyes lacked the warmth they once possessed. I am heading to the office. I will be back by 5 o'clock. When a moment arrives, gather your belongings and depart. Is my message clear to you? Andrea's gaze deepened with intensity. The joy dissipated, giving way to a chilling sensation. Her lips curled slightly, yet she managed to put on another smile. Is this really how it's going to be? I maintained her gaze steadfast. Indeed, it will unfold in this manner. The hours at the office stretched endlessly, feeling more prolonged than ever before. Despite my efforts to concentrate on the figures laid out before me, my thoughts continually wandered back to Andrea, her self-satisfied grin, the way she regarded me, as if I were merely a plaything for her amusement. My hands tightened in fists, and I had to consciously relax them before anyone caught on. However, there was indeed someone who took action. Matteo, my coworker and one of the rare individuals I genuinely relied on at the office, had been observing me throughout the morning. He finally beckoned me over just before lunch and gestured for me to step outside. Hey, Diego, how about we step out for a smoke? He suggested. After a moment of uncertainty, I gave a slight nod. A breath of fresh air might just be what I need to clear my thoughts. The midday sun blazed overhead as I propped myself against the wall and sparked a cigarette to life. Matteo mirrored the action, releasing a plume of smoke before casting a glance in my direction. You appear to be in rough shape, my friend. What's happening? I inhaled deeply, allowing the soothing effects of nicotine to settle my racing thoughts, then released the smoke gently. It's Andrea, I whispered. She's being unfaithful to me. Matteo's brows knitted together in a frown. He muttered a curse. Are you certain? I released a harsh laugh. Absolutely, I have no doubt. I observed the text firsthand. A man by the name of Juan. He shook his head, inhaling deeply once more. Scoundrel. I inclined my head, my gaze fixed on the ground beneath me. She doesn't even try to refute it. This morning, she issued a warning, claiming that if I don't treat her well, she'll turn my life into a nightmare. Matteo emitted a soft whistle. Wow, seriously, that sounds challenging. He tossed his cigarette to the ground and ground it beneath his shoe. He turned his gaze toward me, his face a mask of mystery. There's no need to be concerned, Diego. I'll explore my options. I scowled. Could you clarify what you mean? He simply placed a hand on my shoulder. Believe me, I didn't push him any further. I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wanted to uncover the meaning behind his words. Somehow, I persevered through the remainder of the workday, even as each passing second weighed down on me more than the one before. As the clock struck 5, I gathered my belongings and made my way out. The journey back seemed to stretch on forever. Thoughts surged through my mind, each one a new possibility waiting to be explored. Is it possible that Andrea has left? Or would she be anticipating my arrival, poised to reveal the devious game she had concocted? As I navigated onto my street, my hold on the steering wheel grew firmer. In front of my house stood an old, rusted pickup truck, its presence a testament to years gone by. My heart raced with anticipation. I maneuvered my vehicle to the rear and stepped inside. As I crossed the threshold, the low light barely registered before a sudden, forceful impact struck the back of my head. A sharp agony surged through my head, and the surroundings whirled uncontrollably. I lurched ahead, clutching the back of my head, But just as I sought to steady myself, a flurry of fists and feet descended upon me. I crashed to the ground, instinctively curling up to protect myself from the unyielding onslaught. A boot collided with my ribs, forcing the breath from my lungs. A sudden impact hit my temple, causing the periphery of my sight to fade into a haze. A deep, mocking laugh echoed in the air, just before darkness enveloped me completely. As I opened my eyes, a pounding ache resonated in my head, my throat felt parched, and I realized my arms and legs were securely tied to a chair. I attempted to shift, yet the bindings dug painfully into my flesh. A gag pulled tight against my lips, the acrid flavor of fabric saturating my senses. Then I laid my eyes upon her. Andrea stood before me, a smirk playing on her lips. She was almost bare, adorned with just a delicate piece of material that scarcely concealed anything. Next to her, a man was present, equally unclothed, his strong physique adorned with intricate tattoos. He radiated sheer arrogance, his dark eyes glinting with amusement as he observed my struggle. Andrea let out a soft laugh, tilting her head slightly. Well, look who's finally awake," she remarked. "You really went through a lot, darling." I shot her a fierce look, my breath coming in sharp gasps. She moved in, placing a perfectly groomed hand on the man's chest. "I mentioned to you, Diego, if you treat me kindly, I will reciprocate the kindness." With a subtle motion, she indicated the man standing next to her. Introducing Juan. I tightened my fists, sensing the ropes dig into my flesh. Andrea's eyes sparkled with a vibrant intensity. Juan oversees Colonia Centro and its surrounding regions. He ensures that everything operates seamlessly, keeping everyone in check. She bent closer, her face just inches away from mine. "Do you understand the implications of that, right?" I remained composed, yet I was aware. She smiled broadly, standing tall. "Diego possesses immense power, the leader of Los Reyes de la Muerte, the Kings of Death." She let out a heavy sigh, her fingers gliding along Juan's arm. "From my perspective, it seems you've just experienced your initial lesson in humility." Juan let out a hearty laugh, his voice deep and resonant. "In due time, you'll come to understand." Andrea glanced over her shoulder at me, her face clouding with a shadow of discontent. "I trust this brief demonstration has shown you that I now belong to him." Her finger traced my jawline, sending an unsettling shiver through my skin. "From this point forward, I expect to be treated with kindness." Andrea moved in, her fingers brushing against the gag secured around my mouth. With a swift motion, she loosened it and pulled it away, granting me the relief of a proper breath at last. I coughed, expelling the blood that had gathered in my mouth, the metallic flavor clinging to my tongue. My jaw throbbed, yet I remained resolute, unwilling to reveal any sign of vulnerability. Andrea wore a sly grin. "That's much better," she purred, leaning in closer. Before I could respond, she pressed her lips to mine, her kiss flavored with the sting of cheap alcohol and a hint of malice. I remained still, offering no reaction. She withdrew, her eyes sparkling with mirth. "It's time to move on to the second lesson." She pivoted away from me, gliding back to Juan, her hips moving with a deliberate flair. He seized her with confidence, his hands exploring her form. Before my eyes, they commenced their performance, sighing, caressing, engulfed in their own perverse ecstasy. Andrea inhaled sharply, her eyes widening as she turned to glance back at me. "Observe as I surrender to the passion of a true partner," she whispered with longing. "Are you pleased with what you observe?" I maintained a blank expression, my breaths measured and deliberate. I refused to grant her that pleasure. Frustrated by my lack of response, Andrea broke away from Juan and marched back toward me. She lifted her hand and delivered a blow to my face, the sharp sound reverberating throughout the space. My head turned sharply, yet I remained unflinching. "Speak, you insignificant number cruncher." She let out a sharp hiss. I gazed at her, my eyes smoldering with unspoken rage, yet I remained silent. Juan chuckled, taking a step ahead. "So, You're a tough one, are you? He popped his knuckles. Let's find out what determination you still possess. The initial blow struck my abdomen, expelling the breath from my body. Another blow struck my ribs. Next, another. The strikes became a blur as agony surged through me. My vision wavered, yet I tightened my jaw, determined to suppress any sound that threatened to escape. Once more, I was engulfed by the shadows. As I regained consciousness, the first sensation that struck me was the chill in the air. Every part of me was in agony. My head pulsed relentlessly, and with each shallow breath, a piercing pain radiated through my ribs. I attempted to shift, and that was the moment it dawned on me. I had stepped outside. I found myself sprawled in a vast, exposed hollow. The moist soil adhered to my skin, the aroma of blood and earth permeating the air around me. My body lay exposed, defenseless, marked by bruises, caked in dried blood and grime. With deliberate slowness, I turned my head and noticed a folded piece of paper lying close to my hand. I compelled myself to rise, stifling the groan that was on the verge of breaking free from my lips. My fingers quivered with anticipation as I revealed the note. My dear husband, if you manage to return safely, please come home and brew me a cup of coffee. I trust you've gained some insight from this experience. Andrea. A gradual, frigid fury coursed within me, numbing the ache. I gripped the letter tightly in my hand and gazed up at the towering walls of the pit. It lacked the depth to ensnare me completely, yet my body rebelled with each effort as I pulled myself upward. My fingers clawed at the gritty earth, my legs quaked, yet slowly I ascended, inch by inch. The sky loomed overhead, an expanse of profound, vacant darkness, while the air hung heavy with moisture. I surveyed my surroundings. I found myself on the fringes of the city, far removed from the comforts of home. I found myself exposed, yet it didn't bother me at all. I began to walk. The unpaved path was harsh against my bare soles, every step echoing the memories of my past experiences. Crimson droplets seeped from my injuries, blending with the perspiration and dirt that clung to my skin. I paid no mind to the glances of onlookers, nor to the shocked breaths of those who happened to glimpse me. I had my sights firmly fixed on a single destination, the residence of my superior. The sentinels spotted me long before I arrived at the entrance. Their faces transformed from disbelief to comprehension, and without a moment's pause, they stepped aside, swinging open the imposing iron doors for me. Not a word was spoken. As I entered, the sound of my footsteps reverberated across the polished marble floor of the opulent mansion. The atmosphere was crisp, infused with the rich aroma of fine cigars and the warmth of aged whiskey. The chandeliers bathed the hall in a warm, golden light, highlighting the immaculate opulence of my employer's residence. There I was exposed, wounded, and shattered at the heart of the expansive chamber. In mere moments, a chilling scream shattered the stillness. The maid had noticed my presence. Her hands shot to her mouth, eyes filled with terror. The piercing scream reverberated through the expansive hall, causing a wave of activity to surge within the mansion. Doors creaked open, hurried footsteps echoed, and in no time, the disturbance summoned my boss himself, descending the grand staircase with urgency. He halted just a few paces from where I stood. His keen gaze assessed me from head to toe, absorbing my bruised, bloodied, and exposed figure with a composed, inscrutable demeanor. He remained silent, offering no questions, no expressions of disbelief like the rest. He scrutinized me intently, his eyes sharp and assessing. Then, in a deep, resolute tone, he began to speak. Name. I inhaled deeply, finding my balance. My ribs throbbed. My head was heavy with pain, yet I held his gaze and responded. Juan proclaimed, the kings of death. A subtle change flickered across his expression, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present. Acknowledgement, comprehension, a glimmer of something icy and perilous. With unwavering focus, he addressed his men. Find him a physician. His men advanced with unwavering resolve. Two of them moved closer, cautious yet resolute, and steadied me by the arms as they guided me away. With every step, my legs quaked, my body struggling to maintain its composure, yet I allowed them to lead me forward. They led me into a spacious bathroom, immaculate in white tiles, adorned with gold fixtures, featuring a generous glass shower. One of the men turned the knob, and hot water cascaded from the overhead rain shower. The other motioned for me to enter. I certainly did. The soothing water enveloped my skin, cleansing the remnants of blood, dirt, and the grime of the pit. It burned where my injuries were fresh, yet I clenched my jaw and allowed the warmth to ease my sore muscles. My vision wavered a bit from fatigue, and without the two men holding onto my arms, I surely would have crumpled to the ground. I remained silent. They didn't either. As I emerged, my skin felt refreshed, yet the bruises and cuts stood out even more starkly. A fresh towel was brought to me, and I secured it around my waist while they guided me to a room. The doctor appeared soon after, a man in his middle years with keen eyes and a straightforward attitude. He knelt beside me, his skilled hands carefully assessing my injuries. He examined my ribs, probing for any fractures, and assessed my reflexes. His touch was steady yet gentle. After a brief pause, he remarked, "You're fortunate. No fractures, only severe bruising and some minor lacerations. It's time for you to take a break." He delved into his bag, extracting a tiny vial of tablets. "Use these to alleviate the discomfort." I acknowledged him with a nod as he passed them to me. Several hours drifted by in a blur of agony and fatigue. The painkillers numbed the most intense sensations, yet my body continued to throb, a profound, rhythmic echo of the trauma I had endured. I reclined, gazing at the ceiling, as the day's events replayed in my mind like an unending film reel. Suddenly, the door let out a haunting creak as it swung open. I gradually shifted my gaze, feeling my muscles resist the motion, and there he was, my superior. He entered with his characteristic demeanor of understated confidence, his impeccably tailored suit immaculate, his face serene. Silently, he drew a chair next to my bed and settled in, one leg crossed over the other as he observed me intently. In that fleeting instant, silence reigned supreme. In that moment, a smile graced his lips. "¿Qué clase de fallecimiento?" he inquired, his tone effortless, nearly nonchalant. "What type of demise?" I locked eyes with him, my throat parched, my body yearning for respite, yet my thoughts remained sharp. The moment he posed the question, I was certain of my answer. "Slow and painful," I said. "Gradual and excruciating." A soft, throaty laugh escaped him. He reclined in his chair, rhythmically tapping a finger on the armrest, lost in thought. His smile remained unwavering. "Excellent," he remarked succinctly. He then stood up, carefully adjusting the cuff of his sleeve with a measured grace. "Take some time to recharge," he advised me. "I will create the scene for you." With that, he pivoted and exited the room, leaving me to grapple with my own reflections. The following day, I found myself upright again, aching yet determined to keep going. Every breath sent a sharp pain through my ribs, and my knuckles bore the marks of my restless nights, bruised from the tension of clenched fists. Yet, none of that held any significance. I existed, and I found myself in a state of anticipation. The boss entered my office in the afternoon, moving with the confidence of someone who was already aware of the outcome. He looked my way, evaluating my state with a subtle nod. "In 2 days," he assured, "everything will be ready." He moved on without waiting for a reply. He had no use for one. I offered a subtle nod in response. That was everything. Everything was aligning perfectly. That evening, at my residence, Andrea found herself alone when Juan made his entrance. He entered, his typical bravado completely absent. He appeared on edge, his movements quick and jerky, his gaze darting to the windows as though anticipating an imminent intrusion. Andrea, sprawled comfortably on the couch, lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. "What's going on with you?" Juan let out a sharp breath, raking his fingers through his hair. "There seems to be an issue. A powerful cartel leader has placed a target on my crew." He clenched his jaw tightly. "Several of my companions have left, while others have met their demise." It feels as though we are being pursued. Andrea propped herself up slightly, a frown creasing her brow. What does that imply? Juan's jaw clenched. It suggests we should keep a low profile for some time. A moment hung in the air, the gravity of his words lingering between them. Then Juan turned to her, his eyes piercing. Has your husband returned? Andrea flashed a sly grin, gesturing dismissively with her hand. Kindly. I imagine he hurried back to his mother. She chuckled softly. He's merely a small-time accountant. Juan remained serious. His demeanor remained unchanged. What did he mention about his job? He inquired. Andrea gave a slight shrug. I'm not sure about a specific accounting firm. He brought up his boss at one point, a fellow by the name of Mesa something. She gestured with her hand in a somewhat indistinct manner. I can't recall. Juan tensed up. For a brief moment, his breath caught, but Andrea was aware. He pivoted towards her with deliberate slowness. Mesa? He reiterated. Andrea scowled. Absolutely, what's the reason? Juan's expression grew somber. Could he be a leader of a cartel? Andrea let out a derisive laugh. How am I supposed to know? I have yet to encounter him. A heavy stillness enveloped the space between them. Juan's gaze swept through the house, absorbing the lavish furniture, the gleaming floors, and the framed art adorning the walls. Then he inquired, with a hint of caution, how a modest accountant manages to afford a residence like this. Andrea remained silent. There was no necessity for her to do so. For the first time, a sense of dread infiltrated their thoughts. Andrea let out a derisive laugh, her eyes swirling in exasperation. No way. His superior has to be a major player in the corporate world. My husband is a small man. He lacks the courage and audacity to come close to a cartel leader. He'd lose his composure in the presence of any genuine criminal. Juan took his time before responding. His fingers tapped rhythmically on his thigh, thoughts swirling in a whirlwind. At last, he whispered. I pounded him mercilessly, yet he remained utterly silent. Andrea merely gestured with a hand wave. Perhaps he was simply too frightened to respond. Just as Juan was about to reply, the abrupt sound of tires screeching outside caused them to turn their heads sharply toward the window. The taillights of a pickup truck flickered briefly before fading into the shadows of the darkened street, lost to the night. Juan's whole being tightened. There was an unsettling feeling in the air. He snatched his pistol from the table and marched toward the door, shouting, Hey, where the hell are my men? Stillness. No reply. A chill crept along his spine. Yet he dismissed it and ventured outside, his fingers tightening around the weapon. His gaze flicked across the yard, scanning for any sign of movement, for anything that seemed amiss. His men were positioned outside. Where on earth could they be? He then shifted his attention to the truck. With a sense of trepidation, he approached it, his hand gripping the door handle tightly. He pulled it open with force. Two objects fell onto the ground with a jarring thud. One stepped back, his breath catching in his throat. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he gazed down at the severed heads tumbling at his feet. Both of his men, severed at the neck. Their vacant eyes gazed up at him, devoid of life and emptiness. Their heads remained as a haunting memento. Juan's complexion drained of color as he retreated into the house, forcefully shutting the door behind him. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he met Andrea's gaze, the confidence he typically exuded giving way to a palpable fear. Seize anything within reach. It's time for us to go. At this moment, Andrea scowled. Excuse me? What's happening? Juan seized her wrist, his hold firm. Please refrain from inquiring. Simply take action. Something in his tone silenced her objections. Without a moment's hesitation, she dashed to the bedroom, flinging open drawers and cramming a small bag with anything she could find. Clothes, jewelry, cash. Her hands quivered as she fastened it closed. They rushed through the doorway, one gripping his pistol tightly, his eyes darting through the shadows. The two detached heads rested on the ground beside the truck, crimson liquid gathering in the earth. Juan's jaw tightened as he pushed Andrea inside and leaped behind the wheel, his hands trembling as he turned the ignition. The engine erupted with power as he pressed the accelerator, tires howling in protest as they raced along the asphalt. For an instant, the only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the frantic breaths of Andrea next to him. Yet, in the reflection of the rearview mirror, he caught sight of them. Two dark SUVs followed them closely, resembling shadows. "Damn it," Juan whispered, his grip on the wheel tightening. Andrea turned in her seat, her eyes filled with astonishment. "Who are these individuals?" Juan exclaimed, "Individuals we prefer to avoid." He pressed down hard on the accelerator, the truck surging ahead, yet the SUVs maintained their speed, their headlights shining fiercely like predatory wolves. Andrea held her bag tightly against her chest, her voice trembling. "Take action. I'm making an effort." Juan's frustration boiled over as he veered onto a side road, desperate to shake them off his tail. The truck bounced over the rugged terrain, yet the SUVs remained steadfastly in pursuit, unyielding. Suddenly, a pair of dazzling headlights emerged unexpectedly from the side. Andrea hardly had a moment to let out a cry before the collision struck. A colossal truck collided with them from the left, the sound of metal grinding against metal echoing in the air. Their truck careened wildly, tumbling over in a jarring sequence of impacts. Shards of glass flew. Andrea's cry was abruptly silenced, and Juan swore as they fell, limbs flailing like discarded puppets. As the wreckage finally settled, Juan let out a groan, agony coursing through his body. In a state of confusion, he forced the damaged door open and staggered outside, pulling Andrea along with him. Yet, the moment they stood up, they became motionless. They found themselves encircled. Shadows shifted as silhouettes took form. Men clad in black, their faces devoid of emotion, weapons poised for action. Just as Juan's hand moved toward his pistol, an unexpected figure advanced and struck him sharply across the face with the rifle's butt. He fell to his knees, crimson staining his lips. Andrea let out a piercing scream, attempting to flee, but strong hands seized her, pulling her back forcefully. "No, let me go," she screamed, thrashing wildly. But the men held their grip steadfast. One coughed up blood, his eyes burning with fury as he stared at the looming silhouettes. "Who on earth are you?" No response. They were pulled toward one of the idling SUVs. With their hands bound tightly behind them by plastic restraints, their faces shrouded in large black bags, the doors were forcefully flung open, and then they were forcefully pushed inside. The doors banged closed. The SUV departed swiftly. The SUV came to a halt, its tires making a satisfying crunch on the gravel beneath. The doors burst open, and calloused hands seized Juan and Andrea, pulling them out and flinging them onto the ground as if they were nothing more than refuse. Andrea gasped, her throat constricting as the gritty particles invaded her lungs. Juan let out a low groan next to her, his body still heavy with the lingering pain from the crash. Their heads were shrouded in heavy black bags, enveloping them in an oppressive darkness. Yet, in mere moments, those were also torn asunder. Blinking against the harsh lights, Andrea and Juan stood in an open courtyard, encircled by men clad in dark suits. The atmosphere was heavy with the aroma of gasoline, mingling with a hint of something metallic, maybe blood. Before them appeared a figure clad in an immaculate white suit. He exuded a certain grace, seeming almost incongruous in such a somber environment. A grin spread on his face, yet his gaze lacked any kindness. "Welcome," he said, his voice flowing with a hint of amusement. "I have been anticipating your arrival." Andrea felt a chill run down her spine as he approached, the sound of his polished shoes echoing ominously against the floor. He reached out, lifting her with a surprising tenderness. "You must be Andrea," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Diego's spouse?" Andrea tensed, her thoughts swirling. The way he uttered Diego's name carried a depth beyond mere acknowledgement. It was a deep respect. Then the man turned to Juan, who remained on his knees, his face ashen and glistening with perspiration. "Are you familiar with who Diego might be?" he inquired, bending down a bit, gazing intently into Juan's frightened eyes. Juan gulped, yet remained silent. The man let out a soft chuckle, rising to his feet and delicately brushing away non-existent dust from his pristine white suit. "He is the most significant person in my life," he went on, his tone unwavering. "Diego handles my finances. He guarantees that each risk I embrace, each investment I pursue, is truly worth every cent. He safeguards my wealth, ensuring that my adversaries cannot take from me." For a fleeting moment, his smile wavered, and a shadow crossed his eyes. "Do you grasp the consequences of someone disturbing that equilibrium?" Juan's breath became uneven. He realized now, this was no ordinary man. The unfamiliar figure adjusted his coat, carefully flattening the material before offering another chilling grin. He mentioned, his tone nearly nonchalant. "I am Santiago Meza Lopez." He allowed the name to linger, observing as Juan's complexion faded completely. "You've likely come across my name before." Juan's lips parted, yet silence enveloped him. Santiago let out a laugh, his face alight with a wicked sense of enjoyment. "Creating soup brings me joy." Juan knelt, his hands quivering as he brought them together, his voice unsteady. "Please forgive me," he pleaded. "I erred." Juan knelt, his hands quivering as he brought them together, his voice unsteady. "Kindly," he implored for forgiveness. "I erred." Andrea glanced at him, a look of bewilderment crossing her features. Yet, as she pivoted, her breath hitched in her throat. There, standing next to Santiago Meza Lopez, was Diego. He walked with a subtle limp, the traces of the savage beating he had suffered still apparent in his gait. Still, in the midst of his suffering, he exuded a calm, unsettling poise. His expression lacked any discernible feeling, his gaze icy and inscrutable. Andrea sensed a knot forming in her stomach. This was a different Diego than the one she had once known. Santiago, exuding a natural ease, cast a sidelong glance at her, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. "Have I ever shared this with you?" He pondered, weaving an engaging tale. "Diego was my most reliable enforcer. My utmost." Andrea's gaze drifted to Diego, seeking a trace, a hint, of the man she had once known. Yet there was nothing. Santiago let out a soft laugh. "I had such faith in him that I requested he delve into accounts," he went on, pointing at Diego. "And indeed, he exceeded my expectations. He had a firm grasp on numbers, money, and investments, excelling in each area." Juan trembled, his gaze still lowered. Andrea stepped back, a sudden sensation of the ground beneath her giving way. "But today," Santiago continued, a hint of amusement in his voice, "Diego has chosen to return to his origins, the embodiment of my most merciless assassin." Lopez then retrieved a small knife from his pocket and placed it into Diego's pocket. He smiled and remarked, "I return to you what you once entrusted to me." Andrea trembled, yearning to object, to refute the words that reached her ears. In silence, Diego slipped his hand into his jacket and drew forth the knife. The blade shimmered softly in the muted glow. It was just the right length, neither excessive nor lacking, striking a perfect harmony. Andrea's breath caught in her throat. Juan's head jerked upward, his eyes filled with fear. He attempted to inch back on his knees, yet found himself with no escape. Diego advanced with a fluidity and accuracy that suggested he had practiced this countless times. There was an unwavering certainty. No interruption. No words. The knife cut through the air in a swift, seamless arc as Diego continued to maneuver it with meticulous accuracy. Juan's cries pierced the stillness, filled with pain and despair. Diego was already retreating, sliding the blade into its sheath with a deft flick of his wrist. He resumed his position next to Santiago, remaining as motionless and impassive as he had been previously. As Andrea faced Juan, the truth of Diego's actions dawned on her. Juan sprawled on the ground, twisting in pain, his body shaking from the overwhelming torment of what had just transpired. His visage, or what was left of it, was merely a canvas of raw, exposed flesh. Crimson liquid gathered around him, his muted cries struggling to coalesce into understandable words. Though his eyes had vanished, he remained alert, fully aware of his surroundings. And most troubling of all, he remained able to see. As Diego strolled back, he accidentally let Juan's face fall close to Andrea's feet. Andrea remained motionless, her hands shaking as she held her stomach, nausea creeping up her throat. Silence enveloped the moment. Silence reigns. No tears. Simply overwhelming, immobilizing dread. Then arrived the sound. A deep, mechanical rumble. Andrea scarcely had a moment to pivot before the thunderous engine engulfed her senses. The final image etched in her mind was a flash of silver and a swift, menacing arc of jagged steel before the chainsaw descended upon her. A damp, nauseating crack. A burst of red. And then silence. One was unable to close his eyes, trapped in a gaze he couldn't escape. He had no choice but to endure every moment of it. The chainsaw sliced through bone and flesh with an ease that felt almost surreal. The fragments of Andrea strewn across the earth, the final traces of her being diminished to a twisted wreck. He attempted to scream once more, but the noise that escaped his throat was a sorrowful, gurgling wheeze. I advanced, my fingers clenching the handle of the chainsaw, as its engine erupted into a fierce growl once again. Juan convulsed as I drew near, his distorted features quaking in what seemed to be pure, unbridled fear. I acted without a moment's pause. The blade descended swiftly. It required under 5 minutes. When it was finished, the two forms lay as nothing more than torn fragments of what had once been Juan and Andrea. A shallow grave awaited their arrival. Two of Lopez's men, quiet and precise, unceremoniously discarded the remnants of the lovers into the pit. Soil trailed behind. Before long, the earth appeared untouched, as if no event had ever transpired in this place. As though their treachery, their pitiful lives, had been wiped clean. Santiago Meza Lopez approached, igniting a cigarette, his expression serene. He released a languid plume of smoke, then began to speak. "Take a moment to grieve," he said, his tone steady, bordering on nonchalant. Then we returned to our realm. The atmosphere was heavy with the aroma of blood and newly disturbed soil. The grave remained unsettled, the earth still in disarray. I stood above it, gazing down at the spot where Andrea now lay, pondering if a spirit as vibrant as hers could ever truly find peace. The night lay still, broken only by the soft murmur of cicadas in the distance, a haunting juxtaposition to the chaos that had unfolded moments before. I delved into my jacket and retrieved a solitary rose. The petals glowed with a rich, almost surreal crimson, reminiscent of the blood that had marked my hands. I never intended to return to my lowest point, yet you forced my hand. The breeze whisked my thoughts into the darkness, vanished into the emptiness. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the flower for a brief moment before I knelt down, carefully setting it on the mound of dirt. I provided you with an exit to take. I pressed on, my gaze fixed unwaveringly on the grave. Yet you opted for torment. I stood tall, smoothing out my jacket. My fingers grazed the knife, hidden away, the blade still radiating heat from Juan's flesh. I experienced a complete absence of emotion. Remained calm, unfulfilled, only the chilling, well-known void that had previously been my unwavering companion. I pivoted sharply and made my way back to the patiently idling SUV. Lopez's men lingered at a distance, their voices low and cautious, yet their glances toward me carried an intriguing blend of admiration and apprehension. They recognized my identity now, who I used to be. I swung the door open and slipped inside, sinking into the leather seat as the engine roared to life. Lopez settled next to me, inhaling his cigarette leisurely, his smirk directed at me, which I chose to overlook. The tires stirred a haze of dust as we drove off, the grave fading into the shadows behind us. I chose not to glance behind me. Esteemed audience, we invite you to express your opinions in the comment section below. Also, kindly remember to like, share, and subscribe.